get to the nub of it, it's the College of Piping in Glasgow, at Tago Street in Glasgow, and it was the old building which was owned by Red Hackle Whisky. It was 3 floors up, and it was a ramshackle place, but it didn't bother me at that time. And we're up there, and they had a wee office, and they had a big communal hall, and they had large cubicles off to one side and another in there by occasionally Seamus McNeill, Tommy Pearson. Tommy just listened to a tune, made no comment. I said, okay, thanks, and moved on to the next guy. And that to me wasn't tuition. I was not that bad at defied comment, or he couldn't be bothered talking to me anyway, you know. He was a bit of a scientist and he ate coal. Aye, so I put it down. He's quite an eccentric guy, so I just sort of read that about him when I was 12 or 13. I said, okay, moving on. And but the real tuition was Eddie McLaren from the Clan McRae Society Pipe Band, which was just in its last legs at that time, and Johnny Johnson from Isla, a policeman in the City of Glasgow Police Pipe Band, who was just in the last legs of his career. But Johnny was very good, a good teacher in a way, and we covered March of Space Mules out of Willie Ross's collection, which was the seminal collection at that time.
You had a perception really of who was a good piper, a good teacher, and all this kind of stuff from the onset.
Well, I went to a kind of half decent school, and I knew what a good teacher was. I went to Bill Houston Academy in Glasgow, and I'd had the option after first year of going private to Glasgow High School or whatever, but I never told my parents I'd won this bursary. I just made my own decision. I wasn't taking advantage of it because I thought Bill Houston Academy was a good school. And so I was aware of the fact that there were good teachers, and I sort of equated that in my piping life as well, that you get guys who could teach you are ones that just were putting in their time in amongst a lot of kids on a Monday or a Tuesday or Wednesday night. And so you know instinctively, without thinking it through, you know, who you quite enjoy a lesson from, if you like.
When you were at the piping school,
Mm-hmm.
Were there many opportunities? There must have been opportunities there to join a band.
Funnily enough, there weren't. The College of Piping, Seamus McNeill and Tommy Pearson and the rest of the running it took the view extraordinary at that time, and they kept that view for quite a while. Decades that pipe bands destroyed solo piping as a concept. They thought that it drove away the music out of one's mind and fingers. And to a certain extent I could see where they're coming from, looking back on it. That in solo piping you can attack a tune in a different fashion. You pick your own tempos for a start. You're not dictated to by the drummers at the back. Pipe bands play tunes very lively manner and tempo, whereas the solo piping to a certain extent is a lot more thoughtful. I speak to somebody even this morning who had a recent lesson, and the tempo for a 2/4 march was elevated by his teacher from 62 to 64 beats per minute. Now, pipe bands typically playing 2/4 march in a competition will be 72 to 74.
So it's
certainly I wouldn't have thought as low as 70. So they're playing quite a bit up tempo, and so Seamus and Tommy Pearson took this rather snobbish view that the pipe bands ruined your piping. So they didn't encourage you to be in the pipe band life. They encouraged solo piping.
So how did that affect your playing though? You know, when you were given this sort of individuality, if you like, or allowed to develop that individuality in your playing, when you eventually joined the band, did that affect you at all?
Well, it didn't for the first few years that I was learning, because I wasn't fit to become a member of a band then. I wasn't good enough. And if I wanted to join a band, I didn't want to join a band in a lower grade. No, to be frank, at that time, in the late 50s, there only were 3 grades. A large number of grade 1 pipe bands and grade 2 and grade 3. The whole thing changed later on. But by the time that I was 15 and left school and became an apprentice in the Rolls Royce, and met a chap and a fellow apprentice, David Perry, who encouraged me to go to the band. He was in the Paisley British Legion pipe band. I was of a sufficient standard to be able to play in a grade 2 pipe band, and that was just the right time. And coincidentally, I was phasing myself out of the College of Piping because I didn't think their tuition was good enough. They had their wee favourites and I wasn't one, and I wasn't getting the attention I felt that I required on a constant attendance. I was there every week, but just when I heard sort of thing. Davey introduced me through his father to Norrie Gillis, and Norrie stayed in Crawford, and I went up there for the solo piping and the individual tuition, and that's where really that started properly.
So how long were you getting the tuition there for?
Oh, 5 years, I thought. 4 years, 5 years. But again, he wasn't as good a teacher as I felt, and I still feel on reflection that he should have been. But he went on to teach at Liverpool in the schools programme, and he became a very, very good teacher up there. So I think I was his first pupil, the guinea pig, so to speak. He's a very, very good piper, top piper at that time, but as an individual skill, it's a different skill. Performance and tuition is two different things entirely. And the real good teachers are up on their feet, and they're playing, they're demonstrating, they're singing, and they're picking up in every wee bit that's wrong with your piping and telling you positively how to improve it, bar by bar, note by note.
Did you have a decent instrument from the start, or what was you've got a story about the first pipes?
I had a very pure pipe. It was just my mother and father acquired it from somewhere. I think it was new enough. I don't know where to go to. It was old. It was Henderson, imitation ivory and nickel. Nothing matter with that in particular, but it was just a run-of-the-mill instrument. I initially didn't know how to set it up properly, so it wasn't properly maintained. The bag, a seasoned sheepskin bag, the reeds were in it. The pitch of the instrument was terrible. I don't know what kind of chanter I was using, and so on. And it wasn't until much later, around about 15 or something, I acquired an instrument from Ian Turner, a cousin of my father's. Ian Turner was from Islay. Ian Turner had quite a good set of pipes, though it was a very quiet instrument regarding the drones. And when you had a robust chanter, and especially a band chanter, then the drones got lost. There was an imbalance. The harmonics wasn't there. But having said that, that instrument did me through my time with probably Paisley British Legion changed my instrument during that time, and then I had this instrument. I think it might have been ivory, imitation ivory or ivory, I don't recall. I think it was imitation and it was nickel rounds, but it was a superior instrument to the one I had. It was steady, and that did me through my time with Red Hackle and Renfrew Pipe Band. And I was with the Paisley British Legion Pipe Band with the Johnny Chiquare. Johnny was interesting. He was a Paisley guy. He was a boxer in his earlier life. He joined the army with probably territorials, the same as everybody else, 1939, 40, 39 it would be out, and he was captured at St Valery along with the other regiments. Now, I don't know what regiment it was in, but I strongly suspect it would be either the Seaforths or the Cameron Highlanders. Ended up in a prisoner of war camp for 6 years. In the camp at the same place was Pipe Major Donald McLean, Big Donald, who was, I think, Seaforth Highlanders, somebody will correct me somewhere. And he was an interesting guy because he later on in life worked in lorries and sold instruments and everything else in lorries shop in Renfield Street, but he had other backgrounds as well. He ran the Scottish Pipers'Persuasion Saturday night club in Highlanders, the old Highlanders in Elmbank Street. He also maintained the club instrument, so you could go along there without an instrument and just play a tune, and he had the club pipe set up and they were easy to blow and everything else. Very good instrument. Donald taught Johnny Chiquare for the whole time. I don't know where they get instruments from. Probably, I don't know, these associations are passing food parcels, this, that, and the next thing to them. So anyway, they must get a practice chant. Maybe even get a set of pipes, I don't know. Anyway, Johnny got a good grounding and he come back. Long story short, became Pipe Major of the Paisley British Legion Pipe Band, and they ran it in a regimental fashion, as you can imagine. So much so that they insisted that the band started at 7:30 on the dot with drummers every band practice night. And if you're 5 minutes late, lo behold, you were just getting a row. And he even told Harry McAleer, I think it was McAleer, no, McAteer. He turned up one and he says, you turn up late again, and says, just hand in your uniform, so that we're all putting notice. So standing in the circle and band ready to go. And that was the end of the conversation, right? And that band went very well. We won a lot of prizes in second grade.
What age were you at this time?
15,
Right.
16, and then 17. So
that would
couple
give you a boost at that young age.
And I learned how to blow an instrument, and I certainly learned how to maintain an instrument at that time. And lots of young guys my age were in the band, and we used to go to Johnny's house and get extra tuition, as well as the tuition I was getting from Norrie Gillis. So it was quite intense, a couple of nights a week at the band, a night with Norrie Gillis. So that brought up my fingers, brought up my general standard a great deal, actually. And it was Norrie that encouraged me to leave that band and go to Red Hackle Pipe Band. Different setup, they just quite elevated from where I'd been in second grade. And Red Hackle Pipe Band, very good band. Alec MacLeod's pipe major paper, but he was an alcoholic, could drink half bottle of whiskey and one he just put up his lips, drain it, and fall down, collapse the pavement, pick himself up a couple of minutes later and just continue drinking. But so he was unfit to be pipe major the year I was in the Hackle. So Donald Murray was a pipe sergeant. Don Murray, a very, very good pipe major. He had been a pipe major in Renfrew Pipe Band prior to that. So a very good pipe major. I'm sure Andrew Wright, who's now passed as well, was a very, very famous piper, Andrew, especially the Piper Society secretary for years. Andrew Wright, he was a pipe sergeant, and the band had Norrie Gillis, Ian McFadden, very famous, Dougie Ferguson, famous, and various other characters, and then there's youngsters like myself, 18, and Hamish McLaughlin, Robert Stewart, and various others. So very, very good drum corps as well. And we went 1962 to Belfast, and I maintain we got second. Somebody else said no, we got fourth. Anyway, we were well up in the prize list. Johnny, what's his name, Weatherston, he was pipe major of the 277 Regiment as a reserve regiment, if you like. What they, right out the blue, came and won the Worlds at Belfast that year. And we had a great time. Sailed from Brummelaw to Belfast and the same back again. So you don't do that now. That was quite.
Was that in the day? Just in the day?
That was that would be about 1962.
Mm.
And we all had first class berths because it was Red Hackle was paid for it. And money was a big deal. It was okay.
Did you appreciate at that time though that how well placed, how famous these older pipers were? Did you
Yes, I
appreciate that?
appreciated that at the time because I was into solo piping, and I went to solo piping competitions, and Norrie Gillis says you should start competing. And I don't know why he thought that, but he says, well, the junior competitions are out and you need to start competing. So when I was 18, in the Red Hackle Pipe Band, I competed in the Borough Cup, which was a local thing for Gael people at Dunoon, the Cowl Games. Ian McFadden came along with me. The band had played in the first grade, and I was last on because the stewards knew I was playing with the band, so they put me last on. Went along, saw the judge, and Ian McFadden, famous guy, said to the judge, do you mind if it plays down the grass rather than up on the platform?
Why would that be?
So I think it was because the instrument had been tuned in grass, and so Ian just listened to the instrument, gave me a nod. So I played, and it's a heavy set of tunes that I couldn't play now. Along with Gathering, Piper's Bonnet, Mrs McPherson of Inverness, and I got through fine and I won the competition. So I was quite pleased with that. But little did I know that I wasn't going to win much more in my solo piping after that for various reasons. Piping life took a back seat to other things. So anyway, that was interesting. So Red Hackle, they had an AGM at the end of the season where Peter Shaw, who was the secretary, took it upon himself to come away with some sort of wee fiddle when it came to the election of office bearers and pipe major and the leading drummer and the various office bearers. Peter Shaw took command of the Situation Secretary and said, I move everybody be voted in en bloc. So while the rest is trying to work out what en bloc was, somebody seconded that and it was through, and nobody spoke up, so that was it. So effectively they put the alcoholic Alec MacLeod back in charge as pipe major. And so we all flung our toys out the pram and left. And I went to a Rentry pipe band under Tommy Anderson, who was a very, very, very good pipe major, and he had a young band, very successful, though they were youngsters in it, and we won prizes in the first grade in the following year. So that took me right through to about 1964 or whatever. Interestingly, Ian McClellan, who later became the pipe major of Strathclyde Police Pipe Band, he had been Tommy's pipe sergeant, I believe, and he'd left in 1962 to join the police. So, as I say, it was a very, very good band, but Rentry were skint. They had no backing at all, so we had to go around with the cans round the shops a couple of times a year to get money to just fund the band. And a couple of other things went on that you did gigs that you didn't want to do, but it was just
to raise funds.
To raise funds. I had dabbled with a Rolls Royce pipe band because I worked in the Rolls Royce at the time, and that was an abject failure. I wasn't a very good pipe major at that time. Too young, no drum corps, so the whole thing fell flat in its face. Meanwhile, I'd been playing at various places in Glasgow, and the pipe major of the City of Glasgow Police Pipe Band, Angus MacDonald's an inspector, he heard me playing and he approached and he more or less talked me into joining the police. Now,
so the link was through piping that he joined the police?
Yes, it was. I didn't like the job I was doing in engineering. I was working the tool room grinding. I was working to tolerances of 1/10 of a thousandth of an inch. The human hair's 1.5 thousandths, so 15 times less than that sort of thing. And I was paid the top rate in the Rolls Royce, £25 a week. I joined the police and I got £11 a week. I was single, never asked what the wages were in the police. I was so enamoured by joining the police and playing with the police pipe band. I must say Angus MacDonald's a good salesman. Anyway, but I never looked back. I did enjoy my time in the police. Within weeks of joining, I was playing in the competition, and it was quite an upgrade at that time from the Red Hackle even and the Renfrew. It was like another grade up again. Funny, lots of good pipers. Ronnie Laurie was a pipe sergeant, later to become the pipe major. Angus MacLellan was there, and Ian, of course, a top piper. 2 or 3 others, very, very good players. John McCormick, young guy, and there are other ones in the band, good band players, good drum corps, and we were winning all the first prizes, 1965, except for the Worlds. 1966 won all the first prizes except for the Worlds. In 1967, Angus MacDonald got promoted to Chief Inspector, left the band. Ronnie Laurie became the pipe major and dropped me once, and said I need to sort of improve. Now, I'd been maybe freewheeling a wee bit at that point, and I'd done my probationary period and I'd been on shifts and I hadn't had practiced as much as what I should have done, simply because of the shift work and everything else. So he wanted to give me just a time to just get up tempo. I was on a constant day shift and moved from Partick to Govan, division over at Govan at that time, and I was married, stayed at Shawlands, and I started putting in a lot of work, and over the years I did improve and my piping came up and was pretty good. during the years 67, 68, 69. I was in the front rank of the band, playing on the front rank in competitions. And 70, I just turned around and said I'd had enough, and left the band, went back onto normal duties. Before we leave the band, I could maybe mention the fact that we did a couple of things. Uist was interesting. I think in 1969 went up to Uist and we did South Uist Games, North Uist Games and Tobermory Games in the Glasgow Fair Week, and that was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On the road up we went to Castle Bay in Barra. We got the boat from Oban up to Castle Bay in Barra and got off there only to play for a funeral. And this was the funeral of McNeil of Barra, the clan chieftain. Nobody told us that he was an American. And it was not that none of this roll-on, roll-off ferries. It was just a big boat, and the crane, and it lowered this copper casket. It was about 8 feet long onto the dock side. And we were all, we were dressed in number 1 uniform, feather bonnets, all the belts, the hairy spawn and everything else. We didn't have a number 2 uniform. So we had to get dressed up in this, crossing the Minch, and of course the boat's going on roads, and crew members telling us just a normal day. I said, aye, right. Go off the boat and we're playing Flowers of the Forest. And Sir Compton Mackenzie's wee individual piper, who I later learned was a very good piper. Well, I thought it was just a wee naff at that time because I was young, and I said, who's this guy? And he's playing a different tune for us as the copper caskets marching past us. And there's Americans got off the boat as well, and they've got cine cameras, and you get that gang, get that gang, and all this, and and they're shouting to one another, but the shots are taken of the band and everything else. So the whole thing was quite farcical, I thought. Anyway, they got this copper casket at 90 degrees lying across this Ori boat, and there's 2 of them rowing furiously across the bay to Kishmuel's castle, where the body had to be interred, the coffin had to be interred in there in a hole in the wall. And the Sir Compton's piper, Johnson was his name, I don't know. Anyway, he's standing up in the sharp end of this boat, and the foot up at the prow, and he's playing this tune as they're going across. Meanwhile, the waves are lapping the boat with about 3 or 4 inches to spare before the whole thing just suddenly disappears. And it was all standing there quite matter of fact. No drink or anything at this point, and the boat disappeared, and we disappeared back on board for a silver service dinner, because that's what they did at that time in the boats. But I later learned that they had taken the casket up and tried to put it in the hole in the wall that somebody had carved out, and it was too shallow because they'd only 6 feet for a British coffin or whatever, so to start the whole thing again next day when we were long gone. Meanwhile, John McCormick and I, his instance, I said, do you fancy a drama? I says, aye. So we had an hour and a half, so we got off the boat, went out to the T-junction, turned right instead of turning left, went up to the wrong pub because we got the zigzaggy path at the top, opened the door, and it was roofless. They'd had fired there a fortnight prior to this event, but still open for business. Everybody was in, quaffing away, and John was asking for 2 pints of Guinness and 2 large whiskies, all in Gaelic. So we got this, and I just knocked the whiskey back in a whinny, because that's what you did in these days. None of this sitting business. And of course it took the skin right off my whole mouth, because it was the whiskey had been ruined, it had been in the fire. But I think they just wiped the soot off it and just sold it nevertheless, you know. So that was the start of an eventful week up there in Eust. It rained in Eust and South Eust, and of course it was sunny in North Eust. And Angus MacDonald says that's what always happens. North Eust always gets the best weather. And then of course we're way down to Tobermory the following day, and standing outside Bobby McLeod's Missionish Bar, and we played Caberfay, because his wife, I knew his wife, and she said, get the band to play Caberfay because Bobby hates that tune. So that's what we did, you know. And so that was quite eventful. We did go abroad. We went 3 years to Italy. The first year was to Salerno, just above Naples, where the Allies had landed from Sicily. Lost a lot of men there, and that was a wee notable thing about the visit. We went up and we went to the Allied cemetery with rows and rows of white gravestones, and the band played Flowers of the Forest, and the Americans turned up, and they didn't play in, but it was the US 6th Fleet Marching Band, and they were very, very almost jazz music they played at that time, but they were part of a concert that we did in the nights that were there. So they stayed in the same hotel as us. We gave them LPs of the band, and we get Zippo lighters from them. I still got the Zippo lighter yet, you know. But a great bunch of guys, really, fantastic. And that was the first time I'd been abroad. I had to get a passport and everything, and go in a propeller plane and flying above the mountains in Switzerland and the Alps, and the plane's dropping like a stone, and then it's going right up, and the air pockets all over the place. It was quite an experience, you know.
What age were you then?
I'd be 24, 25, you know, and the band was playing well, and we put up a good concert. And the following year we went to a place up in the north, Aqua Terme, which is in between Milan and Turin. It's a health spa, and that's a huge hotel with a great big swimming pool. And this is in the late 60s, and a jazz band playing at the side of the swimming pool, and the bar was open. You try that one in the Renfrew baths or the Govan baths, you know.
So the City of Glasgow band, what's next after that? What came after that for you?
Well, nothing really at all, because I went back to normal duties. I had been a wee bit of a piping fanatic in the 60s, I thought. I was really interested, my whole life was piping and all the rest of it, but I got a wee bit sick of it. And I came to the conclusion around about 1970 that I enjoyed piping as a hobby, but not as a profession, and not as a job. And really we were professional pipers, because that's what we're doing. But I was working as a police officer, but during my time in Govan. But there's lots of guys in the band and work in the Central Division. Ronnie Laurie, Ian McClellan, Angus McClellan, for instance, they did no police work. None.
But they were just in the band.
And they were in the band, and they'd swan about during the day, practice chanters, this, that, next thing. Later on, the band unit was formed, and everybody's taken away from all the outlying divisions and put in one unit, and worked in one office, in Stewart Street Police Office, and they did nothing all day but play pipes, so it seemed. But when you really looked into, scratch the surface, we were doing police work. But the thing was, Ian McClellan, with the permission of Chief Constable, could draw them out of that sort of thing. Look, I need you to come and get extra tuition from me because you're weak and this, that. So they'd maybe get 2-3 hours with Ian McClellan, who would bring them right up, and that's why we had the World Championship pipe band throughout the 80s, because he had the wherewithal to get everybody together as when they saw fit and spend time on their instruments, their fingers, everything, right across the board. I left the band, so I'd had enough, and I'd passed promotion exams. I went into plain clothes, passed more promotion exams, went into CID, and more or less stopped piping. Until 93, 94, 95, Kenny MacLeod had a shop, and he got me back into it again. He went away to America. When he came back, he formed a partnership with Stuart McCallum from McCallum Bagpipes. I taught Stuart, one of the few I taught during the 80s. And
is that when your friendship kind of developed?
yeah, so I introduced Stuart been playing in the Command Pipe Band, and I did to Stuart what Norrie Gillis did to me, since about 10 years playing with a better band. So I introduced him to Kenny MacLeod, who was pipe major at Glasgow Sky Association Pipe Band, which was a first grade band at that time. So the two of them became firm friends. Kenny stopped being pipe major, and the two of them went away to Scottish Power Pipe Band under Roddy MacLeod, and they got lots of prizes there for a while. And around about, it must have been 98, 99, they started McCallum Bagpipes. It was called McCallum Bagpipes because Kenny had a previous shop in the early 90s, 80s, 90s called McLeod's Highland Supplies. He'd come to an agreement with their partners that they would move on, leave them with that business, which they continued for a while. So they had to find another name, so they couldn't call it McLeod, so they called it McCallum. So it became McCallum Bagpipes. Stuart was the engineer and Ken was the salesman. The lines have become a wee bit blurred as time goes on, but that's how it sort of started off. You know?
So were they originally from Kilmarnock?
Yeah. Well, Kenny was Tintallon Road in Shawlands, so he'd maybe travelled down and this, that and the next thing, you know, but eventually moved down to Troon, where he stays now. Stuart's always been Kilmarnock, and the Kilmarnock football supporter, and is one of the sponsors of the club there and all the rest of it. So anyway, that was Stuart and Kenny. I got them together. And I would go down and poke my nose into factory house things and a cup of coffee and all that sort of stuff. But I never ever worked for them as such.
But you were a kind of ambassador for them.
Well, a wee bit. Amongst other things, Kenny said to me at one point, I says, how's the chanter going, the new McCallum chanter? He says, oh, I'm trying to get folk to take it. I says, what about police pipe band? He says, oh. So I says, I'll phone. So I phoned Plunkett, who was pipe major, and to get his due, he came down, went up and picked him up at Johnston, where he stayed, Brought him down to the factory, spent an afternoon in the factory and culminating an order for pipe chanters for the Strathclyde Police Pipe Band as it was at that time. And they started to play McCallum chanters, and I've played them ever since. So that was about 2000, 2001, that chanter. And that was Mark 1. They quickly moved on to the Mark 2. Mark 2 chanters far, far superior, and it's still played to this day by quite a few folk. I've got one over there just now, and there's none wrong with it. They developed other chanters, and in the meantime, Kerry was a bit of a whiz with all the advertising and everything else, and he got me to go to Brittany, meet up with people, and Yannick Mongie and I took a van load of bagpipes 5 years in a row down to a music festival, and sold instruments, sung Charty at Aldre in the La Centre, that's the centre of France. Didn't speak any French first year, went to Alliance Française, learned French, and the next 4 years I managed to sell pipes in French.
Did you learn to speak French because of that experience?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
You always need a reason for doing things, and so I enjoyed speaking the language, and so that was a unique experience going away down there. 7 hours in the van to go to down to the place we stayed at. We pension hotel, 1 star or something, no aircon or anything like that in it at all. Chassignon, it was the name of the village, Boulangerie, and this hotel, that was it. And the next village had the supermarché, you know, so we went there in the morning and picked up the water for the stall, but the weather was fantastic, very, very hot. And 1 year it was say 42 degrees for 5 days. Another year we went, it was thunderstorm and lightning fought about 50 yards at my back, and just split an oak tree and it went on fire, and the explosion from that blew me off my feet. It was just what an experience, but that was life in Saint-Chartier.
You were lucky.
But huge number of stalls selling all sorts of instruments, guitars, you name it, they were selling it. And of course they had all sorts of other bagpipes, continental bagpipes, bagpipes from the south of France, from Italy, Spain, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, all over, and there was all in evidence at these festivals. You know?
Were you aware of, presumably you would have been aware of all these kind of instruments at that time?
Not really. No, that was my first experience, and some of them sounded horrendous, but hey ho, it's just that's it, whatever turned you on, baby, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an experience just turned up, and I turned up with fuel hose and brogues and everything the first year, but the heat was such, you just forget it. So the subsequent years, because of the heat, I had just a pair of sandals on, bare feet, a kilt and a shirt. And that was me in the spawn, of course.
It's still hot even at
that. That was me. But to keep about 4 sets of pipes going every day.
Because that's a challenge as well, isn't it? Because of the heat of it.
Because you're selling the pipes, so the basic set of pipes, student pipes, right up to, silver and imitation ivory, whatever. Imitation silver, but they all engraved and heavy set. But to set all these things with the stall, we sold whistles, sold reeds, sold everything. And Yannick, he did all the paperwork and everything else. I just sold the stuff. Well, he relied on me to sell the pipes to the punters. So in the first year, sold 11 sets of pipes in the first week.
Really. So from that experience, then,
Aye.
what was the development for you?
Well, the development really was just meeting with these different people, speaking the language, eating food, travelling about, and Britain was a fabulous place as far as I was concerned. I'd had a brave experience just going there in '97 to the Fête de Convoy, which was their annual festival. But that aside, Brittany was tremendous. The people were tremendous. The pub there and all the rest of it, fantastic. You know, the Cayley Bar sold more beer than any other pub in France, except for a couple of pubs in Paris.
You'd be welcome because you were Scottish as well, presumably.
Aye. And I stayed with folk that didn't speak any English, so to bring French right up, that was the first couple of years, and you know, you're there for a few days and you've got to speak French and that's it. And that's where I learned to eat crevettes and oysters and all this sort of stuff, and mussels.
Somebody's got to do it.
Aye, but I'd never eaten that stuff before. I'd eaten lobster and crab, obviously, from the Western Isles, but so great.